When you shoot in a run and gun situation, the most important is the speed. You can adjust the parameters of your camera to match your creative vision and get the best quality of the picture, right? Sound speed, camera speed, and welcome to another Create Greg video. In today's episode we will look at Sony FX3 and how to adjust the menu and customize all buttons to make the most of your camera in the context of speed and quality of the picture. We will apply it to Sony FX3, but the same applies to FX30 as well, because the difference between these two cameras is the sensor size. We will take into consideration the latest firmware update to 2.0, which gives CINE AI as well as dual ISO and couple other pegs, which brings this camera even closer to cinema line, and how you can copy my personalized menu to your camera. Without further ado, let's look at the main menu first, and I'm not going to cover every single item on the menu because it will take ages. I would like to focus on how to get you up to speed and show you my way of thinking. I leverage useful things like you can adjust and create your own menu by moving important parts of the menu to the fast menu and create a few of sub menus to get the access to the items you will change most of the time on the movie set. However, if you would like to learn about every single item on the menu, I would recommend Who Is Mad. He made a two-part series about every single aspect of the menu. Looking at my menu, so the first one, straightforward, to choose the file format. I'm shooting most of the time 4K HAVCS. Then we've got the movie settings, what's your frame rate, as well as recording setting. Next, we've got the log shooting setting, and this one is very important because this one gave FX3 CINE AI with the latest firmware update. And most of the time I'm shooting with CINE AI when I can choose between 800 and 12,890 ISO. And I'm using just only them because they will give you most dynamic range and the best quality of the picture. Sometimes when you need to be more flexible with the ISO, so I want to be able to access classic way of shooting with flexible ISO on the spot. Next one is picture profile. As you see, this one is gray out because I'm shooting in CINE AI. If you shoot in classic mode, you can get access to picture profiles. Because I'm not going deep dive in every single setting of the menu, so it might turn out some of the parameters will be gray out in your menu and you might be puzzled why they were not on mine. If you've got the situation, press them and the camera exactly tell you why you cannot turn it on. Find that parameter which stop you from turning it on and change it, as simple as that. Next one on my list is to manage user LUTs. So basically I can import LUTs with the latest update to menu, and what is cool about it, because you can get the LUT straight into your camera, and when you shoot you can see exactly how the final video would look like, which will help you to adjust exposure as well. It's very useful and you can add up to 16 personalized LUTs. Next on the list is APC mode, which will allow you to go from the full frame readout of your sensor to APC, which will give you chance to not only use full frame lenses but as well as the Super 35 lenses. The biggest drawback here is you cannot use it in 4K, and this one only apply if you shoot in HD, but it's good to have it just in case. Next one on our list is touch function in shooting. So we've got three options, touch functions. So when you shoot you can touch the screen to pull the focus, very useful. You can switch to touch tracking, so if you've got the moving object, it will create the frame around the object to track it. And the last one, you can literally turn it off if you don't want to have any touch tracking on your screen. A side note, I would highly recommend to watch Philip Bloom video about autofocus in Sony system. It's brilliant to understand how to make the most of it. Next one with the latest update of the software is autofocus assistant. So this one came from Sony FX6, and this one allow you to pull manual focus while you are in autofocus mode. To make the most of this camera, I have to work in the hybrid mode and be able to switch between autofocus and manual focus, depends on the situation, to not to lose the shot. And the next one is record media setting, and allow us to set up how we're supposed to record to the cards. I would recommend to use simultaneously and record to two cards at the same time. In the event if one of the cards failed, you will have always backup. Next, we've got the proxy setting, which I do not use very often because my computer is capable to deal with the 4K. However, However, if your editing machine is not powerful, I recommend to turn on proxy, so then you've got the easier to digest files and you'll speed up the editing. Next is NTSC PAL selector, and this one is very important for me because I'm shooting in NTSC while I'm in the PAL zone. I'm shooting in NTSC because I prefer 24/25 frames per second. Sometimes when I work with the client, they require me to shoot in 25, so I want to be able to switch between the system in no time. This is why I keep it in the fast menu. Next one is for formatting cards. When I'm start shooting project, I'm putting new SD cards. I like to format them in advance. I don't like to have the format option easily available in the camera, just in case if you press by accident. So it's accessible easily but hidden enough not to press it by accident. Next menu for me is all about the HDMI. So when I'm outputting the signal to external monitor, I want to be able to control that. So I can control resolution, which I've got set to auto, output setting, which is more detailed, including raw output if you want to record raw externally. Then we can turn on HDMI info display. I would like to have the menu on my external monitor. It didn't work well for me in the past. I always keep this one off and use the internal monitor here to access the menu, but I've got it just in case if I need it. Then I've got the control for HDMI, which will allow me to trigger recording on my external monitor with using record button on the camera. Very useful. Next menu is all about the sound, so I can control the channels I'm going to record to my camera. Just want to remind you, we can add the top handle from Sony with additional XLR to make this camera even more powerful. Next, we've got the audio signals on, and I will talk about this one later. Next one is fan control set to auto. However, I want to get the quick access to it just in case it will start making too much noise, so I can set to minimum. And we can turn on anti-flicker shot, but this one only applying to photos. I rarely take any photos with that, but if I need any thumbnail and want to switch to photo mode and I've got some flickering, I can always turn it on to remove it. Next one, I will start with airplane mode. I turn it on to save the battery if needed. Then we've got the Bluetooth function, and I'm using this one fairly often because I take advantage of remote control from Sony, which allow me to start and stop recording without going to camera. It's very useful, especially when you record like this kind of video, so I don't have to stand and press on and off of the camera. Just need to use remote, which I've got always with me. Next, you can turn it on and off Bluetooth remote if you want or don't want to use it. Next is the pairing, so if you want to pair your Bluetooth device with the Sony. I've never used any other brand, so I don't know whether you can pair with some other remotes, but this one works like a charm. And the last one, you can manage different remote device, and here is the one I'm using at the moment. The last thing is you can control the menu itself, so you can add different items from the main menu to your fast menu. So once you become more familiar with the menu, there might be certain function you would like to add to your personalized menu. As I said, it's not the perfect one, but the one which works for me. Next, I would like to talk about this quick menu from Sony, which we got with the latest software update, and this one makes this camera even better to operate because in this two menu you've got everything what you need for filming, from changing shutter speed, frame rate, white balance, codec, etc. to so much more. And you can get access to the most important video function in these two pages of that menu. Very well thought, Sony. Hats off for that. Once we cover my custom menu, let's talk about the custom buttons and the function menu to even further speed up the process of using your camera. So now let's show you how to custom that button. So we go to setup, we're looking for operation customize. So now we can custom different part of the setup. So we see what we custom at the back of the camera, top, front, what we can custom on the lens as well as the wheels. I will show you quickly what kind of function I assign to which kind of button, and then I will use that button and explain what's the reasoning behind it. So let's start with the first one, which is over there, and I use it for focus magnifier. Then I've got the one at the bottom here for audio recording level. I keep this one as a not set. I will explain that later on. Then we've got the zebra display, picking, changing of the frame rate for recording. Then we've got on the top, autofocus, manual focus, selector toggle, white balance, base, ISO switch. This one is very important. So this one is about the focus. I don't use it at all because I use a touch screen. And then we've got the movie shooting just to start recording. Next, we've got at the front another button to start movie shooting. Then on the lens we've got additional buttons which you can customize with certain Sony lenses. I use this one for shooting because when I'm pulling focus manually, I've got the button quickly to start recording as well, very useful. And the last one, which is very important, for the front dial I use ISO, for the back one I use aperture, and for the wheel over there I use a shutter speed, and I will explain you why I did it right now. Let's start from the back, and button number 5, which allow us to zoom in to get even more precise focus. Then we've got our function button, I will talk later on. Next one is a display, so we can rotate between different functions of the display, from histogram to keep the level when we are shooting, or go between different focus modes. So as you will see, some of the buttons I left as the original to not to get too much of the confused. So then when you look at the peaking, this button literally turn on and off peaking. The same with zebra, we can turn it on and off. Then instead of using shutter here, when we press shutter we can choose the frame rate. So if I'm shooting at 24 frames per second and I want to move to 60, what I would need to do, I would need to adjust my shutter speed. So I decided to use that wheel over there to change the shutter speed. So in a run and gun situation, when you want to change frame rate immediately, you will have a shutter speed to match that frame rate pretty much on the same button, so you don't have to move your finger anywhere else on the camera, which will speed up the process itself. And then we've got this button in the middle of the wheel, which is not assigned, because when I'm changing my frame rate and adjusting shutter speed, I don't have any other function pressed by accident and slow me down or not to adjust the frame rate and shutter speed properly. And then we've got the predefined button to see what we recorded on our camera. And the last button, number 4, we assigned to adjusting sound recording levels. By now we know we set that ring to adjust our shutter speed. Then we've got another ring over there which we set to adjust our aperture. It is good one because we've got it under our thumb when we shoot, so you can change it easily. Most of the time I'm using lenses with the aperture ring on the top, so it's for me more convenient. And the last wheel at the front we assign to our ISO, and what you need to know when you shoot in CINE AI, this wheel makes no difference, because even despite you see the changes on your screen, it's just only for the final view, but the baked-in file will have either 800 or 12,800, one of these two base ISO. However, when you need to shoot in the old style with flexible ISO, this one can be very handy to adjust your ISO to your need. So now let's look at the top of our camera, what kind of button we've got here. First we've got the zoom in switch, which I don't use at all. Then we've got the shutter button, which we can of course assign to start recording video, but we've got so many buttons to start recording video, so we don't need another one. However, when I'm in the menu and I want to leave the menu quickly, I press this one halfway through and I will leave the menu. I'll use this one to get the autofocus as well, so yeah, pretty useful. So the next button, number 1, is called iris, but we do not use it for iris, but we use it as a toggle to switch between the manual and autofocus quickly. And the next button, number 2, is white balance, and we kept it as it is to change the white balance. The next one is ISO, and we switch this one to go between the base ISO of 800 to 12,800 and back. And I can tell you right off the bat, because we've got only 2 ISO, so to adjust your exposure correctly, you would need something like variable ND filter. With the flexible ISO previously, it was much easier, but now taking consideration we've got just only 2 ISO, so you are limited by using ND filter or close the aperture to adjust the exposure. But the trade-off, you will get the most dynamic range and the best quality picture of that, so it's worth to stick to CINE AI and maybe invest in variable ND filter. The next button and joystick is for focus, which I don't use it. I prefer to use the touchscreen at the back. Maybe there's some benefits of using that. I've never used it too much, so if you know how to make the most of it, let me know in the comments. And the last huge button called rec is to start recording video, which was no point to changing. Then we move to the front of the camera, and we've got the button number 6, which we use as a record button as well. So sometimes when you keep camera this way, you can use your finger to start recording video. Can be useful. I don't know whether I use it even once, but yeah, let's keep it this way. And the one on the lens which I assigned to start and stopping recording, because the way how I keep the lens and use the manual focus, it will allow me to start and stop easily. And to be honest, I'm using this one 99% of the time compared to any other button, so definitely useful for me. Let's get back to our final function menu. To get the access to the quick function menu, you simply press the function button, or you can literally swipe it up from the bottom of the screen to get access to it. How cool is that? So let's start with the first option I've got here. You can choose the different focus area, but in 99% of the time I'm using the wide one. However, you can use the specific one, depends on your situation. Then we've got face autofocus on and off. Very important when you shoot face, is very useful, but there are moments when you want to turn it off, so it's good to have it at your disposal. The next one, you can choose different type of stabilizing your image from off, standard to active. When you shoot on the tripod, it's good to have it off, but when you shoot the handheld, you can choose which one do you want. Next one is to choose how the color space will be displayed on our back monitor, and we can choose from S-Log, Rec 709 to user LUT. So you remember when I was talking about the shortcut to set up your LUT, and this is where we can choose between the different LUTs we've got installed on our camera. Very useful. Next one, we can choose to turn on and off our touch operation on only in the preview mode or off. So when I'm using with my camera rig and I'm using the external display, sometimes I want to turn off the touch screen, not to touch it by accident, to change focus for instance, so it's good to have it at your disposal as well. Next one is silent mode. We can turn it on and off, and this one is very important because when I'm shooting like this kind of videos, I like to know when the camera is going on and off by hearing the sound. When I'm shooting interview with the client, I turn the silent mode on, so not to have any sounds which might distract anyone during the interview. So let's get back to beginning and let's look at the first one, which is autofocus transition speed, and we can set from fast to slow in 7-point increment, and it will allow us to adjust how quickly our autofocus moves from one focus point to another one. To complement that function, we've got sensitivity. So the first one was like about the quickness from one point to another one. The second one, how sensitive is your autofocus. So if you go for one, we'll be locked on, and then we can go to very responsive, so we'll move between different faces very quickly. It all comes down to how I want to use it, but having quick access to it is very handy. Then we've got our peaking level, so we can set from high, mid to low, depends on the circumstances. We want to adjust the level of the peaking around the subject. Next one is peaking color. Most of the time I'm using red, but there are certain situations you might need to switch to yellow, red or white. It's completely up to you, but it's good to have it at your disposal. Next one, and very useful, is our zebra level, so we can adjust our zebra levels based on the way how we want to judge the exposure. Very handy. And the last but not least, we can turn on our marker display. We can predefine what kind of marker we want to have display. For instance, in my case, I've got the marker display for 2:1 ratio, and if I'm shooting in that ratio, I can use it for better framing on my videos. So I will see what's within the frame, what's outside of the frame. On the top of that, this camera allows you to export menu settings and transfer them to any other FX3 or 30. What I would do, I will make my settings available. Link to download them you will find in the description. You can apply it to your camera, rewatch the video potentially and understand it even better. What's more, you can adjust it to your liking and style of shooting video. I hope this video helped you in general, to give you insight about my way of thinking and shooting. If yes, you might find this video useful as well. Thank you for staying until the end, and until next one.